Hello and welcome to this week's webinar. This week's webinar, we've got a fantastic one, which is sort of bringing two hot topics together, which is commercial conversions and HMO opportunities and ultimately maximizing those commercial conversions. We have a fantastic guest with us today, who you can see is just on the screen there, but to be honest, just a little background on this, we've got lots of PD rights changes going on at the moment, which have made commercial conversions more attractive. And ultimately with the changes in tax relief over the past few years, making buy-to-lets less attractive and HMOs more attractive, what better way of really sort of kickstarting your sort of 2022 than really sort of going where the government is trying to sort of push you really with that development and where the opportunities are in this country. And who better to do that than the ultimate safe pair of hands, which is Matt Baker. So for anyone who didn't know, Matt Baker is the CEO of the HMO Platform. He's also a seasoned investor and developer, an entrepreneur, with an extensive portfolio of next level HMOs. We'll leave Matt to maybe tell us a bit more about that, but yeah, also co-founder of the HMO Platform, which is a training company helping people get into HMO investing and growing their existing portfolios. So yeah, I think we've got the perfect person for today's webinar. So welcome, Matt. How are you?
Well, thank you, Andrew, for having me on.
Very good, very good. So I suppose before we get into it, let's sort of break the ice a little bit. I mean, I suppose, like say you've got an extensive portfolio, what sort of made you think, right, I'm going to start sort of teaching everyone and getting into the sort of training side of it?
Yeah, well, it started by seeing how the HMO industry was evolving, and the majority of it was to do with the poor quality of accommodation that was out there, but also seeing how other people were creating HMOs that weren't going to last the test of time, and seeing that other people were also teaching how to do it, well, I was going to say the old way of doing HMOs. So it was trying to help people to stop making silly mistakes when creating HMOs, but also part of what we see the future of HMOs is in how the service is provided, as well as just creating a nice home for someone to live in. So in order for that to happen, there needs to be a bit of a movement, a bit of a change in tack from the landlord side to create that for the tenant side. So we can't do that alone. We're developing, and we're developing as quickly as we can as a company. But if we can get others to develop in that same way, then we're going to have a huge impact on the marketplace, which then has a huge impact on people's lives. So to the training company essentially was to do that, and also, as I'll show you in a minute, I've got a background in education and in the music industry actually. So it kind of made sense that when I got into property that I'd actually start kind of helping and giving back. I really enjoy helping other people and see them succeed.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, that's why we think you're a great person to work with as well. And that's what we're hopefully here to do as well, and hopefully provide some fantastic insights and help people with their 2022 plans as well. So before I hand over to Matt, who's going to sort of give us a bit of a run through of the state of play and all the changes, the session will be recorded. We'll do a big Q&A section at the end. Feel free to keep posting questions. Maybe when Matt's doing his bit, I'll try and sort of pose questions to him as we go, if necessary. And yes, there'll be a little survey and stuff at the very end as well, just to see how we got on. But other than that, I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to you, Matt. I believe you've got a set of slides there.
Yeah, here we go. So, in fact, what I'm going to do. Can you see those okay?
Yeah, fantastic.
Move screen so I can see you and the slides at the same time. So there we go. See that again?
Yeah.
Real. Yeah, so today, as Andrew mentioned, we're talking about commercial conversions and HMOs and how they cross over, because there's a huge window of opportunity which has just opened up in 2021, but we're not entirely sure how long that window is going to be open for. So there's a few things that we're going to focus on today, a bit of basics, but also then looking at how we can use these opportunities over the next 12 months and really dive into it. The window may stay open longer, but it may be closed, and I'll explain what I mean by that very shortly. So just a bit of an overview of some of the types of projects that we've done as a business ourselves at Scott Baker Properties. And so yeah, we started off very basically with a few buy-to-lets. We kind of eased ourselves into it, but then very quickly realized we wanted to get into HMOs and high cash flowing properties. So which is why we do projects like offices to 8-bed HMOs, or houses to 6 or 7-bed HMOs. So just looking at this screen here, you can see this one at the top left was an office to 8-bed HMO and a 1-bed flat. The one down the bottom, that is a commercial property, which is now a dessert shop and a 4-bed HMO. Then we've got down the right side, this is like it was a semi, it was a 3-bed, now a 7-bed, and on the right here, that was a cannabis farm, which is now a 6-bed. So we've got all sorts of different properties. Oh, and the middle one, which is probably our largest one, a 21-bed property there up in South Manchester. So we're all over the country, and we're all doing all sorts of different projects, but with that end goal being the same of creating great quality shared accommodation. I'm also a best-selling author, as you can see. Randomly, there's a book beside me, but we do have this book out, which I released in March this year, which I was very grateful to get to #1 on Amazon. So it's a best-selling Amazon book, and for those of you that stick around to the end, and there might be a little something for you. Yeah, so this is all about how you can develop HMOs and co-living spaces where tenants stay and pay. But today it's taking a look into commercial projects and how commercial projects can end up as HMOs. But I think because you guys have followed Nimbus, or you followed us for a little while, you'll be aware of some of the strategies that you used to be able to do to convert commercial buildings into residential. Because the old way, there were quite a few different use classes. There was G, there was O, there was M, there was N, there was PA, there's Q, there's no R, but we're kind of running down this list, and they're quite complicated, and a lot of these have expired and changing, and so the old way kind of disappeared come the 1st of August. But the old way meant you had differing rules for each change of use. Some were easy and quite expansive of what you could do, some were difficult and quite restrictive. And at the end of the day, HMOs were okay, so you could go from office to house to HMO, all through using a permitted development, whether using a prior notification or without as well. And that's okay if there was no Article 4 directive in place, which would stop that conversion of the C3 dwelling to a C4 HMO. And just to remind what an Article 4 direction is, it's first of all, it's not a reason to panic. A lot of people go, I can't do HMOs in this place anymore because they're just bringing in an Article 4 direction. For example, Birmingham just brought in a big, massive citywide Article 4 direction. People are going, we can't do HMOs in Birmingham anymore. Guess what? It's just got a little bit harder. But I know loads of places in Birmingham where you can still get HMOs through. Their policy is not necessarily that restrictive, but the council are just learning how to use their policy at the moment. And they're going to be told very soon by inspectors what they should have been doing. So it will be possible to do stuff in Article 4 directions, directive areas, most of the time. But so what that Article 4 directive does is it removes the permitted development right, which we had, which is called the Class L right, to go from C3 dwelling house to C4 small HMO. But we just apply for planning. But there is some good news. And the good news is that the government have simplified our use classes. So that we used to have A, B, C, and D, and they all sorts of did different things. And so we had the A class, which was retail essentially. So we had general retail, professional services, and a few other bits and bobs. And then B1, which was offices. You had B1A, B1C, B2, which is industrial, B8, which is storage. All these other types of uses, which kind of have now gone and been amalgamated into some different use classes. So they've been simplified into one commercial use class, which is Class E, with a few exceptions. And those exceptions are what's F1, F2, or sui generis. So in summary, there are pretty much 5 places where buildings can end up. Class C, which is residential, Class E, which is general business use, class F1 and F2, which essentially is a community-based use. So if anything is in this use class, generally we would steer clear of it because it's very difficult to get it into residential without a long and drawn out process. So again, there might be an opportunity there, but you're probably not going to do lots of these types of deals. And then everything else falls into sui generis. And some of the old A class ended up in sui generis as well. So, but this is important. This is what we need to know moving forward. And for our purposes, how can we use permitted development to create new HMOs? Well, we're taking things that are in this class here and making them into this class here, in a nutshell. So how do we go about doing it? Well, there are two permitted development routes. And the first one is class MA. Now, class MA, I'm sure some of you may have seen many workshops or webinars or information about how this works. But I don't really see people talking about it in relation to HMOs. But before we get to HMOs, we just need to know the basics. So it means you can take all class E to residential. So beforehand, you used to be able to take offices, retail, light industrial, and make it residential. But now what they've done is they put every single general business use in class E. So there are now more types of buildings that you can convert to residential. But now we have to comply with minimum residential space standards. To be honest, it's about time this came in because there were some very unscrupulous developers that were making really, really small units, like 12 square meter flats, studio flats, and then expecting them to rent well or to be able to sell them. And, you know, it's just not fit for purpose, I think, in a modern society. Unless they're part of some kind of communal or co-living scheme, which is something that we do, then we've got maximum of 1,500 square meters. You can only convert up to 1,500 square meters within the building. And it must have been vacant for 3 consecutive months prior. Not particularly hard to do, especially if it's a vacant building and you're buying it, because it's going to probably take you 3 months to buy it. And it's probably been on the market for a month or two as well. So just be aware of that if you do buy a building that has got tenants in it already. It must have been in the use for 2 years prior. So this also opens up a lot more buildings than we didn't have access to before, because there was what was called an effective date, which meant that if you were to convert an office, it must have been in the use class of an office on a specific date back in 2013 or whenever it was. But now it only has to have been an office back 2 years, and then you can convert it. So if you want to take the long game and put things into this use class and then convert it later, you can do that if you really want to. They do assess a few things, and there are others. This list isn't exhaustive, but these are the key points. They will assess the loss of a nursery or a healthcare centre. So if you're looking at whether a nursery or healthcare centre, they're going to go, is this going to affect the provision of healthcare or provision of nurseries in that town? So you'll never be able to convert the last one in the village, a bit like how they look at pubs. So that's essentially what they'll be doing now. So they will be harder than others. But the key thing for us who are looking at creating HMOs is that they've removed that Class L permitted development right, which means that you cannot go office or shop or any takeaway to residential and then from residential to HMOs, because you have to stay within the C3 use class. However, nothing to stop you from applying for planning permission from C3 to C4. And again, that's not necessarily going to be refused as long as you've created a really good scheme. But something else which is quite exciting, where we've now got a huge opportunity. This is probably our biggest opportunity for 2022, which is the new Class G. Some people call it the Super G. I think we just call it's just a new Class G. But some of you may remember we used to have the old Class G, which allowed for the addition of 2 dwellings above a shop. And that didn't require any permission at all in regards to any paperwork in with the council. It was deemed consent, so you could just go and do it. Whereas the new Class G is now a prior notification process, so you now need to submit your plans and then get permission through that prior notification process in order to be able to start works on those flats. So what it's done, it's now gone and said you can do 2 flats above all Class E. So you can create 2 flats above an office, 2 flats above a gym, 2 flats above a Andrew, throw another idea in there.
Well, yeah, nurseries, healthcare, well, I suppose anything now. Yeah.
Mm.
That's the whole point with Class C, isn't it? It is Class C for everything. But yeah, shops, banks, yeah, pretty much if it's on the high street, you can put something above it.
You can put something above it. Can't do the ground floor, but you can do 2 units above it, which is fantastic. You do have to comply with minimum residential space standards, same as Class MA, and similar to Class MA, which I didn't mention there, but I'm mentioning it now. You need to be able to allow natural light into all living spaces. So we're talking bedrooms and lounges, not kitchens or bathrooms, and they don't need to have windows. So if you've only got 1 window into the property, it's going to have to be 37 square meters as a minimum and a studio layout so that you've got natural light into the bedroom and the kitchen area. And it had to be quite a big window, and the council would have to be okay that's enough natural light coming in for that particular space. So just be aware of that. Windows are the major problem now with permitted development. Because with permitted development, you don't get permission to change the exterior of the building, there's always going to be some risk as to how you can get the windows in the right place. But with the right team in place, you can probably get planning to put a decent amount of windows in a building, because we have done it before. And the great thing about the new Class G is that the Class L permitted development right still works. They haven't removed that in this new Class G. But there are some people that think that was an oversight rather than an intention. So if they've done it for Class MA, why didn't they do it for Class G? So it's possible that this may get amended to include that removal of that C3 to C4 PD right in a future amendment of the General Permitted Development Order. So that's why there's a window now, and that's going to be at least a year away, we'd say. So you've got this window now where we can submit these new Class G permitted development rights as prior notifications and get permission to convert. So for example, I could take a shop on the high street and create 2 6-bed HMOs, as long as it wasn't an Article 4 area. So essentially I've created a 12-bed, and it could be a really nice, great co-living scheme. A huge opportunity there. Yes, Andrew.
Which is just, yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Like I said, this is a huge opportunity.
Well, it was already there for flats above shops, but the opportunity is there. The fact it's added to all those other types of buildings where you could get it in. So you might look at an office conversion and going, I don't think this is going to really work through Class MA. But if you're happy to leave the ground floor as an office, it could be co-working for the benefit of the building. It could be for all the benefit of the local area. But then you can put 2 6-beds above it. So in an office, you can always get away with a 12-bed HMO, which I think is bloody awesome.
No, but I think what's key, I think, is actually, you might have had investors sort of troll through high streets and particular locations again and again and again and think, right, every building has been converted. Well, with the recent changes that, it's almost a level playing field again. It's sort of like, right, let's double check everything again to make sure that there's no opportunities that have, been missed in the past that have now, become available. So I think that's what's, just such an exciting time right now, isn't it?
Yeah, but also, I think you say it opens up opportunity, which means that there's more for everybody. So people go, oh, office directors, people have bought up all the offices, all the opportunities gone, which is opportunity is never gone entirely. But because they've just done this, you can probably go to a random town in the UK, anywhere in the UK, or England to be specific, find an office which someone hasn't thought about, and then just convert it into flats. As long as it's not in the middle of an industrial estate, it's probably going to make sense. And so just again finding that right opportunity at the right time.
Yeah, just a quick one here, Matt. While it's got 2 6-bed HMOs. Will a HMO 6-bed not require planning, and the number of occupants will be more than 6 unless they are single beds?
So no. So a 6-bed HMO wouldn't require planning, because remember the use is down to the number of people occupying it. So if you create a 6-bed HMO and they're all double bedrooms, that doesn't mean that it needs sui generis planning, because it's big enough for 12 people. So it just means that you can only put 6 people in it. So we would create a 6-bed HMO and put 6 people in it. The only caveat here is that the national minimum space standards, we wouldn't say to the council, this is a 6-bed flat. We'd create a 3 or a 4-bed flat first and foremost. We'd build it, and then once it's built as per the plans, then we would alter it to add a bedroom or two. And that would be the way of complying properly with the permitted development rights, because once you've got a 4-bed flat, there's nothing in planning which stops you from making a 6-bed flat. But the change of use from C3 to C4 or from C4 to sui generis is all about how you use it, the occupation, not the physical makeup of the building.
Okay, well, I can see there's a few more questions, but what we'll do, we'll keep going, and maybe we'll get into a bit more detail around specific bedrooms and beds and all that kind of stuff maybe later on.
No problem. So I kind of covered this, where are HMOs easier above a lot more properties, so I won't go into that again. So where are HMOs harder right now? Well, whenever you use Class MA, it now requires that onward planning permission. Any non-Article 4 area, this is the key thing, because let's say we're going to take a town like Warrington, and I'm going to show you a case study in Warrington in a minute, and the council never had to decide, they rarely have to decide how to create a C4 dwelling, because it's PD, everyone just does it. So when they get an application going, we've got this 3-bed flat, we'd like to turn it into a 4-bed HMO, please. So C3 to C4. They're going to be a bit confused by that, because they go, really? What? But that's PD. And they go, oh, actually, no, it's not, because you created that flat through the new Class MA or the Class G, or the Class MA, yeah. So what you'll find is that some councils won't know what to do with it. So you can expect some easy wins where they're like, well, I don't see the difference. We used to have PD, right? So you just let them have it. So some will just do that. Others will, you can expect refusals, but again, if you appeal it, quite often you're going to win, because it depends on the policy that the council have. But if they don't have a policy, it's hard for them to refuse you, because they don't have any tests to test you against. So they're going to be picking random policies out of their core strategy, and the inspector just turns around and say, well, that doesn't apply here. You don't have a policy, therefore you can't. You know, this is reasonable development. You're not going from a 3-bed to a 12-bed. You're going from a 3-bed to a 4-bed, or a 4-bed to a 6-bed. You know, it's not unreasonable and not a massive change of use. So yeah, I think it's still very much possible, but then there has introduced a little element of risk. So this is where I would be speaking to your ideal planning consultant, your architect, the team that know that area and also know these rules inside out, back to front. And those people, yeah, not everybody will. So that's there we go. In summary, know the rules. It's like I knew it was coming up. So let's move on to that case study. So what I want to do here, I've got a couple of case studies, and I'm going to show you how. So obviously we haven't had time to do a deal and complete a deal in this new way before. So I'm going to take a deal that we've done the old way as a commercial conversion and show how it could be done the new way, because it can be done exactly the same way, but just a slightly different route. So here we have an 8-bed HMO. So it was an office. Start again. So it's double fronted. If you've seen me speak before, you will have seen this project, but probably not in this same way. So we've got the light well at the bottom for one room. We've got a light well down there for another room. So this is a 1-bedroom flat. Then we've got an 8-bedroom HMO over 3 stories in the building itself. So our initial planning strategy was this. So we used what was called the old Class O permitted development rights to go from office to residential. And we had a B1 office, and we said, let's have 2 C3 dwellings, a house and a flat. Went through, no problems at all. Then we used our Class L permitted development rights on the house, so the bit above, which allowed us to go from C3 to C4 HMO. Didn't need to speak to the council. That happens through occupation. So you put in 2-3 people, but when the 3rd person moves in, it becomes a C4 HMO. And planning permission was then required to go from C4 HMO to sui generis use. It was for and that was plan was 7 rooms, and then we occupied it with 8 tenants over 8 bedrooms, because actually, you know, again, once you got permission, we can add rooms or take rooms away as we like, because the change of use is to do with occupation, and 7 to 8 is not considered to be a massive change of use. So that was fine. And then we got it revalued using a commercial valuation at 10.5% yield. So we bought it for 147, and then it got revalued up at 483,000. It's worth about 525 now, and we bought this about 4 or 5 years ago now. So I don't have time to go into how to calculate commercial valuations today, but that's how it was valued on the turnover of the property rather than the bricks and mortar, because it's deemed to be a commercial asset. So the new way, how could we do it if we were doing it today? So say we bought it, we would have the Class MA permitted development right to go from Class E office to 2 C3 dwellings, a house and a flat. Now, what I could do is to put a planning application at that point for a C3 to C4 HMO. So I could go, well, this has got permission to be a family house. I'd like it to be a 6-bed HMO. I put that application in, and then the council goes, yep, that's absolutely fine. Don't see a problem with that. And again, we get that checked by a planning consultant before we bought the project to make sure that's the case. But then once we've got the C4 use, then we might submit a planning application for sui generis use. We put a staggered lot of applications in to make the change from C3 to C4 is an easy change. Change from C4 to sui generis 7 is an easy change. If I went from C3 house to sui generis, that's a bigger change. Wouldn't necessarily be rejected, but you're going to be asked more questions along the way. So again, speak to your consultants who will know the council, because it's pretty much down to the council and what they're likely to do. So they might be happy with C3 to C4, but not C3 to sui gen. So you take the long way around essentially. And then we do the same thing, occupy with the tenants and get it revalued using that 10.5% yield. So it is possible, but we have less certainty on the HMO on day one. But the reason why we know this worked is because we own the one over the road, and we had to do this one exactly that way, because we went from C3 to sui generis 8-bed, and that was approved with no problems. So we know that we would have been able to do this one on this side of the road with no issues doing it the new way. Cool. Case study number, yeah, so go on, Andrew, you've got any questions on that?
Yeah, no, not too much, but I think, what's key there is, like you say, working with that key team, and, we'll sort of come on to where how Nimbus can help you, find that power team. But, just trying to look for that sort of low risk strategy, as you sort of go through it, and like you say, you might look at that building and think, right, I'm going to get, 20 people in that building. It's just about having a plan and going about it in the right way, rather than just going for that one big application and then council having a bit of a sort of shock at it. It's just about sort of thinking, how do you minimize your risk as you go through that, what you want to achieve, basically. And I think, that's a great example.
Yeah. It's always risk mitigation, because there's obviously money on the line. It might not be your money. It might be working with an investor, a JV partner, a bank. Development lenders won't necessarily lend to you until you've got planning in place. So you've got to take this all into account of how are you going to fund it, what's your planning strategy, and what works you need to do when. And say, someone said to me that doing HMOs was like trying to shoot an arrow into the middle of a target, but then you've got all these kind of moving obstacles in between. So you've got to know when the obstacles are all out of the way to actually get your arrow in the middle of the target. But then you want to introduce your commercial conversion to it. You basically got something massive just swinging right in front of you. You've got to just miss, and then you can deal with the HMO stuff later.
So I think that's just all planning, isn't it? It's just sort of with a bit of a breeze as well and everything else. It's it's about, like you say, working with people who know that authority, because, like I say, authorities will have a way of doing things, who are then going to, like I say, help you fire that arrow right through all of the obstacles to get what you want. So that's it.
And you know what? Sometimes you do get knocked off course, but it's knowing how to pick yourself back up again and find another way around.
Indeed, fantastic.
And this is a great example of that, being knocked off course. So this is the finished product of what is 21 bedrooms in the south of Manchester, in Stockport. Now, the plan for this project was to take the office, which had permitted development rights, again, those Class O rights, and we went from B1 office to 7 C3 dwellings as flats. And it's over 4 stories, so we were in the basement, or it's a semi-basement. Those light wells are kind of half, so quite a lot of light in there. So semi-basement, a ground first and then second floor, because with PD rights, including new ones, you get the opportunity to convert the entirety of the envelope of the building inside. not touch the outside, but everything inside. So you've got loft space, you can use it. If you've got basement space, you can use it, convert it into residential, as long as you comply with all the other things that I mentioned so far. So the plan was then to create those 7 C3 dwellings and then use our Class L permitted development rights to establish the principle that we can put 21 people in that property as small HMOs. And those flats range from a studio all the way up to a 5-bed. So it was about 1 studio, a 2-bed, 3 or 4 3-beds, and a 4-bed. Sorry, 3 3-beds, a 4-bed, and a 5-bed. So that was the layout, and that was due to how the property had to be laid out for structure. And then we submit a planning application for multiple C4 HMOs to sui generis use for 21 or 22 bedrooms, depending on if we wanted to have extra communal space or not. That was the plan. Did not go to plan. And reason being, and I haven't really talked about this very much publicly. I talk about it quite a lot with our clients because it's great learnings, but I don't really talk about this publicly because it is also still ongoing. We generally get what we want in the end. But what actually happened was we had our Class O permitted development right. But the thing is, we bought the building with that right in place. And the thing about permitted development rights is that when you get your prior approval, you then have 3 years to complete the conversion, not to start it. So it's different from every other planning application. There you have 3 years to complete it. So we were on course to complete within about the 18 months that we had left on that permission. But it's essentially, we were on course, and all of a sudden our building control company went bust halfway through the scheme. And what that meant was we had to then go back to the council to do a retrospective building control application, and they had a whole host of other things to say about it. And they went overkill on everything. So we had to change the scheme, and we had to work with the council who just had hundreds and hundreds of new building control cases put on them, because this is a national, I struggle to remember the name of them now, but they were a national provider that went bust because they couldn't get their insurance renewed as kind of a knock-on impact from Grenfell. So I don't know whether you heard of that, Andrew.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the company in particular, but yeah, I imagine with a lot of these, a lot of companies associated with that kind of sort of fallout from Grenfell have certainly struggled in time, haven't they? In a lot of these insurance companies and things. But yeah, I mean that's quite quite a thorn in the side right before that's about to lapse. Then, so what are we talking? Sort of months before, or what was that sort of ticking clock? That you were sort of staring at.
Well, we didn't know at the time because we thought, oh, it'll just be a smooth process. We just move over to the council, they'll go through it all, and then they'll tell us what they want, and we'll agree what we want, and then we just do it. But what happened was they were so slow at responding. They would take like a month between, us providing them information, them coming back to us. And as much as we like to chase and get them on sites and to do stuff, it just took forever. And then the contractor started to have, because this was delayed, the contractor started to not perform. And then we had, and then at the very end, we hit the beginning of the pandemic. So all sorts of things you couldn't foresee. And in the middle of that, the planning, so the 3-year period to complete it lapsed, which meant that we've now got this building, which the council still think is an office, with no permission to convert to flats, but it's pretty much completed as flats. So we're just like, what do we do? So then we had to resubmit the Class O because they approved it the first time. So there's no reason why they wouldn't approve it the second time. That went through with no problems, apart from the fact that they now knew that we wanted to make HMOs. And the reason why they knew they wanted to make HMOs is because the building control is now looking at it and they're going, okay, they're designers as HMOs. And also we had already submitted our planning application to convert the flats to HMOs, to a large HMO, because we were on schedule to complete the works before the application would have been looked at. But then we had to undo a load of stuff, move stuff around, get extra sound tests, put in fire lobbies, and so it became a bit of a nightmare. So what we had to do then was so we've now got this building that's got PD rights to be 7 flats, but not be HMOs. Okay, because they said we don't particularly want you to do HMOs here because there's not very much parking. But it's about a 5-minute walk to the train station. And there's a bus stop literally here outside the doorstep. And also the number of people living in that building are deemed to have a certain number of cars. and which is incidentally the same number of cars that they would ask for an HMO. So if it can cope with the number of cars that it's got already as an office or as flats, then it should be able to cope with that number of cars. So we're just in the process of appealing that condition to remove it. Again, we've had a transport note done to argue that case. Just so it gives us the option to rent them as HMOs if we choose to. It's actually doing quite well as service accommodation at the moment, so we can see what we do with it. But our aim is for this one to be a 21-bedroom shared, co-living space. So with the new way, just to clarify, we essentially it's exactly the same. So there's no difference to our reality, because essentially we had a permitted development right, which then removed our permitted development right to go to HMO. So that's exactly what the new Class MA is. So we have been able to create 7 flats which haven't got permission to be HMOs, but we can, again, one of the other ways to do it is just to apply to get maybe 3 of those flats as HMOs, and they will assess it like any other building. So what's the density of HMOs in that surrounding areas? If there aren't that many, there's a massive road next to this one, and there's also residential houses which aren't very many HMOs. So again, so the addition of 3 or 4 HMOs in that block wouldn't be deemed to be a massive problem. So you just need to go through the planning application process. So it is still possible. So yes.
No, I was going to say, I think that's I think it's quite interesting, and I suppose what's also quite interesting, I think, is there's always other routes, isn't there? And I know Paul, the co-founder of Nimbus, is always very much one for having multiple exits, and I think, like you say, it might not be the exit you want, but as a serviced accommodation, it's then or I assume it's still then producing a return on that particular project and everything else. So it's not like it's, oh God, I've got to go all the way back to an office and we've lost all the value in that building. There are other options, and I think that's what's great about some of these things, is it's just about how far you can push the value. But ultimately, there will be, if you can't get all the way, then there's a point at which you could still generate a decent value from some of these properties, and because you're converting them from such low value uses, Class O, or some random sort of tertiary located shops and all of that kind of stuff, you're converting those, that even if you don't quite get every single bedroom converted and everything else, then you're still making a decent return. So I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Making sure you've got, I suppose, multiple exits, and not, you don't always have to absolutely maximize every penny to make a return. You want to be looking for properties where if you only get half what you want, you'll still make a return. It's just then how you maximize that even further.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Fantastic.
Yeah. How do we find these properties, Paul? Andrew.
Well, that's where we come in then. So what I will do is take control again, and this is then where we'll then feed back into Nimbus Maps. So thank you very much for that, Matt. Let me just get this up. Right, so ultimately, I think there's a few bits there which we sort of looked at, but fundamentally we need to be able to find those opportunities and then assess them and connect with the right people relatively quickly as well. So what I will do, I will open it up. We've got plenty of people on here. So if anyone would like to suggest a location, we'll then do a quick assessment, find where there's a potential opportunities, do a quick assessment, and just a very brief overview of how Nimbus Maps can help you. I won't go into too much detail. I am padding, by the way, so people feel free to put in locations. Oh, I can see they're all flying.
Quite a few coming in here.
I couldn't see the chat thing there flying up, but now
I think Clive's done this before, because his town was in there well before everyone else's, well before you'd even said what we were doing.
So we've got, well, maybe we could do a couple here: Rochdale and Exmouth, and in Devon and Ipswich and Hull. So we could certainly do a few, and thanks for everyone for coming through with those. So like I say, this is completely off the cuff. I don't know Rochdale at all, but we shall have a look and see what Rochdale has to offer. I seem to have been logged out. I've been playing around with the with the test site, so that's probably why. I need to log back in properly, so I'm in the right one. There we go. So Rochdale. Let's have a look. So for anyone who's completely new to Nimbus Maps, this is fundamentally the interface. We've now done a search. It's centered on this location here. And then this is all the ownership that's being highlighted within that search area. But what we want to do is ultimately clear that off for now. And let's get a feel for Rochdale. I don't know Rochdale. So if we're looking at this, what sort of opportunities have we got? And there are a couple of things within this sort of market section that I think are extremely useful for understanding an area. One being, and certainly with a sort of view to converting to HMO, one being the average pound per square foot. Rochdale, being a fellow northerner, this is in the north, and yeah, some quite low residential values. New build development would certainly struggle at these sort of residential values, unless you can get some very cheap labour and materials. So we know we're looking at £100 a square foot if we're in Rochdale, and to be honest, it's fairly consistent all across the centre. There's clearly a nice part out here, and to be honest, the sort of surrounding areas start getting slightly more expensive for residential properties. The next one is the HMO spots on there. What this is going to do is then say, right, here are all the existing HMOs, and certainly for someone like me, not an experienced HMO investor, unlike Matt, then I'm going to be sort of saying, right, well, where are the existing HMOs? Because that's going to tell me there's a market for HMOs, and I'm going to then start looking in and around those existing HMOs, which you can see from Rochdale. I mean, I wouldn't really say there is an area really, other than maybe there's a site sort of cluster this side of the sort of central town area. I'm guessing it's somewhere in here, or maybe it's down here, and then there's another sort of cluster here and here. So let's just pick this one as it looks probably the most central, although I don't know Rochdale overly well. But we can see here, and certainly on this road here, we've got a couple of HMOs. We can click on any one of those and it will give us some further information about that particular HMO. But the other sort of beauty here now, if we're saying, right, let's go and find some HMOs, is that master map. And the key thing here really is then understanding where are those sort of smaller properties to be able to convert to that, basically maximize the opportunity. Like when, Matt has obviously had to look at, alternative uses, serviced accommodation, but where is it where you sort of think, well, look, if we convert all the building as it currently stands, we can make a decent return. But where is there opportunity to then further extend that building to get even more value out of that building? And we can see here, sort of these two properties, to be honest, are extended to here, but actually next door and the one next to that have been extended all the way to the rear of the garden. So what this is telling me is almost, it might be worth even looking at seeing if we can actually buy these HMOs within a view to then extending out the back. So even though it's an existing HMO, there's still an opportunity to further maximize the value on that particular one. And likewise here, again, it's, you've got one which has got this big extension out the back. If we could sort of switch and see, big sort of extension here, nothing on this one. Again, big extension there, could be an extra 2 bedrooms, certainly, big communal space here, and then convert existing rooms that are already there. So this is the standard elite package. This is then where we're saying, right, okay, where are HMOs? Where do we want to be focusing on in terms of pinpointing on that map that, right, we want to be in and around this area. And ultimately, you're looking for C3 properties where then we can potentially convert them, if that's the standard way. I know we're talking about commercial conversions. Now, the easiest way with that is what we call Elite Plus. This is the second tier of Nimbus Maps. And the second tier basically highlights where those opportunities are. So as Matt gave a great little summary of Class MA, Class G, which are sort of probably the two of the sort of main ones right now, and the two that we've talked about. We've got overlays now, which are going to tell us where those opportunities are. So if we zoom out and do Class G, let me just take all these off so we can see it a little bit clearer. So you can see where I've got a couple of these little sort of monetary figures here now. These are Class G opportunities on the map. And not only that, you know, when we had the HMO on there as well, we can now see we've actually got one here. So there's a load of HMOs up and down this sort of road through here. And we've now got two properties which have been highlighted as potential Class G opportunities. So now let's have a quick look at the street level. We can see these particular properties: Mayflower fish and chips takeaway, and also the one sort of further down looks like a salon. Or is it D's Cafe? But yeah, I think it's this one here. So we've got a couple of units here, you know, which basically what the overlay does is pinpoints to where it meets that criteria. So it knows we've got a Class A opportunity on the bottom, and the upper floor space is low value. So for example, if we were to click on this title, we can open up the information panel here, and we can see on this one, I was going to say there should be some upper floor space here, all internal storage with a rateable value of less than £1 a square foot, which that rateable value is indicative of what their rent was back in 2015. So effectively their rent is, you know, let's call it £1, you know, somewhere in that sort of order, which even at 7, 8, even at probably lower yields and all that kind of stuff, which I wouldn't expect, then you're looking at sort of what, £15, £16 a square foot as a sort of capital value in its existing form. Residential values, as we saw, were £158 a square foot. So now we're going from something which is sort of £15, £16 a square foot, maybe 20 with a premium to encourage them to go, is then going to be converted all the way up to 160. If you were just going to sell it as an apartment, as a commercial yield, you know, then you're driving that yield up, then it can be even higher again. So this particular one, like I said, you click on the opportunities, you see, you can see those details, you can see that breakdown of where all that value is. And not only this, like Matt said, you know, now we can get really creative with these things. Obviously this is Class G, so we can convert the uppers. Then you've got Class MA to then convert the ground floor as well, you know, and certainly say the one on the end here would probably make sort of sense. It looks like they're old houses anyway. Looks like that's got a bit of work to convert that back to a house. Maybe the east less so, but you know, you can see that certainly this one on the very end of the run, all surrounded by, other than a pub, but opposite lots of housing as well. And it certainly looks like more of a rented location than maybe a high spec sales location. Maybe that's why the sales values are what they are. So fantastic ability now to find Class MA to convert the ground floor and Class G to convert the upper parts, which are just internal storage at the moment. And we know through the HMO spots that there is already an existing HMO market there. Admittedly, not a huge one, being completely honest. You know, there isn't huge amounts of HMO spots. One of the things it might then be worth looking at is then sort of zooming out a little bit, and obviously we can see which parts of Manchester really appeal from a HMO point of view. But even Bury or Bolton seems to be a sort of slightly higher concentration of HMOs, and then maybe, you know, for greater confidence, maybe then you're gonna have a better time trying to find HMOs in and around this area rather than focusing on Rochdale. The next step really, so like I say, we've got, if you're looking to convert the commercial, we've got the strategies to point you in those directions, Class G and Class MA. You can see Class MA has quite a few in here as well. If we go back to Rochdale, what have we got in Rochdale? Whole load more opportunities, different opportunities. Again, you want to be finding some around those sort of HMOs, so they've got a bit more confidence that you're going to get something which is then going to be able to convert through to and this came up against the usual the usual issue. So like I say, this, there will be an assessment if we convert this. I mean, would you typically say, Matt, it's a case of stay clear 100% of community centres? There are just better opportunities out there?
I think it's a case by case basis. And I think when you know your area, you'll know what's going on there with other community centres. But if you can search for, I don't know, you can search for community centre uses and see how many there are, or just do some research. Because if there are lots of community centres, so for example, where I live on the south coast, the council are selling off community centres, which means they don't need them.
Okay.
I would disagree with that, but that, yeah, you could say, well, actually the council's selling them, therefore it's deemed not to be required. Therefore, I think planning would be looked upon favourably.
And again, maybe that's then looking at that, you know, if you run sure of yourself, then maybe then working with a planning consultant who knows that council pretty well and has maybe worked with community centres is then going to have a bit of an understanding of that. So then you can get a very quick idea. So let's say we can point to those. The next one that I want to sort of highlight are just then HMO opportunities. So number 7 and 8 here with the Elite Plus. Number 7 is looking for where there are existing HMOs and then basically saying, look, regardless whether there's an Article 4, like Matt said, an Article 4 isn't, oh God, turn my back on that area for HMOs. It basically just means you've got to do a planning application. So slightly more risk, but ultimately, as long as you're passing that council test, then you're reducing that risk even further. So what we've done with this overlay is then highlight where those potential ones are. So we can see that there's existing HMOs on this street. There's actually 3, and yet all of these properties would then make sense to convert to HMO as well. And not only that, they're color coded based on the size of the building on the plot. So the smaller the building, and therefore the more scope there is to extend, the sort of redder, the warmer the color is, you know, so we can click on any one of those. Not only that, this overlay then tells you if there's an Article 4 in place. So we can see up here in Rochdale, there's no Article 4. Unsurprisingly, there's not an overrun of HMOs. We can see there's no Article 4. Therefore, we could actually pursue this under the PD rights rather than pursuing a planning application. But this overlay works right across the country. And so I'm not sure whether there's anything in, say, Manchester or, you know, let's pick a really sort of high dense area. And we'll see whether there's anything just in this location. So, you know, you look here, and if we sort of said, just have a click one of these, yes, there's an Article 4 in place. So obviously here, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's sort of by the university or, you know, major hospital or something, which is normally where you'll find a lot of HMOs. You can see how from the red dots, there are huge areas which are heavily intensified HMOs. However, rather than just saying it's an absolute no-go in this area, you can apply that council test of how many HMO properties are within that 50 metres. And we can see here there's 5% for this particular property relative to the others around that. So this test is being applied. So you can see some of these it doesn't work for, because obviously when you do that, it just catches enough HMOs that it doesn't trigger. Then you get the other one that is. So on a street here, and certainly in this location, clearly it's a prime area for HMOs. There's actually properties within those same streets that could be converted, even though there's an Article 4 in place. It just needs to be a planning application to go about doing that. And again, switching down, looking at that master map view, and then trying to find, well, which ones have been untouched almost, you know, and haven't been extended. You can see some of these have been further extended, these sort of existing HMOs here. So then this would be a great one to potentially write to and see if we can get hold of their information using the information panel. So we can see here it's a private individual. We'll give the opportunity to buy the title. Simply add that to your workflow, buy the title. Your workflow is your ability to then go and send huge amounts of letters very, very quickly, simply by downloading all this to Excel. It splits out all those names and addresses, all the titles you've bought as well, you know, so it'll include both private and company ownership, splits them all out into a nice Excel file, combine that with your letter, and you could be then sending hundreds of letters very quickly indeed. And not only that, you're not just targeting any old property that comes on the market, you're targeting properties that you know are going to convert well, I say that you have a high degree of likelihood of converting to C4 through a planning application, even though there's an Article 4 in this place. So,
caveat that, I'd always say use that as your starting point, and then go and speak to your planning consultant, because you need to understand the nuance of how that council counts houses, because there's always a nuance about whether a house is incorporated or not. So the lower the percentage, the better. So if you're at 9% and it's going to take you to 10%, then it's more risky. Whereas at 5%, then you've got more room to maneuver.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. Like, we're very much a data platform. We can only go off the data we've got. Like I say, if there's a random house that's unlicensed but the council's aware of or something, then and they include it in their figures. Like I say, we can only give you the information. None of this is to say, absolutely make, you've got to do your own due diligence off the back of these. But one of the things which Matt was saying, I was coming on to next, is then finding that planning consultant and architect who's going to then help you in this location. And so here we probably want to look at Rochdale. So under the exports planning, what are the planning consultants who are working on HMO type properties? So we can click on HMO, puts all the keywords in for us. We can export that to an Excel, and I'll explain this a little bit further. But what this is basically doing, this is rather than having to go to the planning portal and try and find a planning application, this is a much better way of doing that now. So now we can search across any local authority. We can search for basically a group of applications that all meet that same criteria. So in this instance, we're looking for any planning application that references HMO. And then if we look at that Excel file, which is just opening up, here we go. Then what we can see now is the links through to the planning portal. So you can obviously go and have a look at the details behind that application, the reference number, then that description of the application. This is a whole manner of things, but ultimately you can see these are all HMO applications. And then I'll go to the bit I was referring to. If we go all the way to the right-hand side, you'll see agent name and agent company. Depending on the local authority, sometimes you want to look in one list or the other, but fundamentally, if we apply a load of filters along here, and we want to find a good architect and a good planning consultant to work with, then we can scroll down and see, right, well, from the applications in Rochdale referencing HMO in the last 2-3 years, there's a whole host seem to be just done by themselves. I wonder if these are just a lot of prior approvals and therefore have just been done by individuals. But then actually you can see there's a whole lot of architects and planning consultants, for example, Planet Town Planning, which are progressing applications in this area. We know these are the most recent HMO applications. So we know they're working on recent HMO applications, and we know they're working on HMO applications in Rochdale. So if we want to work with someone, these are the list of people that you want to start investigating.
Also worth checking that they're being approved.
Yeah, I was going to say, so this, I mean, basically this Excel file, I'll explain a bit further, but there's a whole host of information. It really is a bit of a wealth of data here. So you've got the descriptions there. So obviously you can correlate those back, if you want to sort of try and filter those down to just the kind of things you're after, then look to see who's working on those. Obviously that whole status of the application, like Matt said, if you're getting a lot of people who are just getting them refused all the time, avoid them, but obviously everyone else then use that. So what you could do is simply take those out. Whoops, that way. And then again, we can go along now and say, right, well, these are all the people that I've worked on approved or pending applications, and therefore we can progress, discussions with these people accordingly. The other information on here as well, let me just put all that back in so we've got a nice full list. You've got the submission date, you've got the decision date for those applications as well. So again, just building that planning intelligence. Is it taking them longer? Are they sort of taking their time to come back and raise queries and everything else? Then you can obviously double check that. You've got the address of the property linked where it is on the map, who owns it. So again, if you want to look and target a particular company, then you can do so through this as well. You've got the address of these, the registered address of these companies. There is a way which, we can go through all this on a demo. I'm conscious of time. I want to open it up to a Q&A section, but absolutely book in with the team and I'll give you a run through of demonstration how to really go into town and all this kind of stuff. But you can search for companies, find all their existing portfolios and really look into all that as well. But you've got the address, but the sort of headline thing really, which I think is really fascinating, is then the price paid. So again, if you're looking to buy some of these properties in this area, converting them to HMO, rather than thinking, I've got to pay a premium, this is what I'm going to do, you can have a look and see what other people are paying for them. Both pre and post planning as well, you can see, look, if one actually got planning 2 years ago and has only just sold recently, then you can get a feel for what those exit values are as well. There is one more way of doing that, which is through the comparables, which will be the last thing I show you, and then we'll jump on to a big Q&A section and everything else. So say we're looking to buy properties in here and we're trying to understand what they could be worth as both HMO and obviously just C3 as well. We've got the sales comparables section under the filters. Now we're basically looking for residential comparables. So we'll leave all of those toggled on. We're going to search a little bit further and wider, and then we're going to press search here. And what it's going to do, and interestingly, it looks like this one. Was this one highlighted? Let's have a look. Has it changed hands recently? The last time this one changed hands was 2016 for 241,000. So that one didn't get highlighted. Let's just run that search again. So now, if we take everything else off the map, we can see all these red properties. All these red properties have sold within the past 2 years. They're residential properties that have sold in the past 2 years. We can click on any one of those particular properties. We can look up on the information panel here, and we can see what they paid for that particular property. However, where the real value is actually, and this is, I know there was a few HMOs in this area, wasn't there? So let's not search any further and wider. Let's just see what we get. Under export, sales comparables, it's now going to take all this information and turn it into an Excel file. That Excel file looks like this, where you can see the address of the properties, the price paid for those properties, and the date that it completed. Where we've got the EPC data, we can give you the square footage, and therefore we can calculate that pound per square foot. We'll tell you whether it was a house or a flat, and then we'll also tell you whether it was a HMO or not. So basically, when this property sold, did it have a license in place? And you can see when that last issued license was. So this one here was issued in the February, sold in the October, and sold for 285,000. So again, we could look up the details for this. It's not managed to pull through any bedroom numbers. These are estimated numbers from the information. We haven't been able to pull that up, but what we could potentially do, let's see if we can find it on Rightmove. So 32 Melverton Road. So again, we've got all the links through to Rightmove. We can scan down. Where's 32? Here it is. And it's a 3-bed terraced house by the looks of it, but then there's a floor plan. So all of a sudden, even though it was HMO, we can now see that there's what looks like 5 bedrooms, HMO. And then we can then start to get a feel, and you can then start comparing against your other properties. So a really great way of getting an understanding that if we're looking to buy one of these, yes, we can have a look on Rightmove and see what houses are selling for in that area. But then what would that potential value be as a HMO? Now we've got an idea of what that potential uplift is for investors and gaining investment and all that side of things as well. So I think I've hopefully covered enough, and the purpose really today is just to give you a bit of a flavour for all the different things that Nimbus Maps can do to help you on those the steps of that journey, and understand how to find HMOs and assess them and manage them. And obviously we've used Rochdale, but I appreciate the exact same thing could happen in, the other one was Exmouth, or the next one on here. Don't worry, I'm not going to do the whole thing again, but if we just sort of toggle on HMOs, we can get a feel for what this area is like. And then, yeah, lo and behold, let's clear those off. We have got a load of HMOs. There sort of seems to be two sort of areas of HMOs there. And you just apply the same thing again, looking at those values, right? Which streets work really well, which ones have the potential to expand, and really just hone in on the right kind of properties that are going to work. And this is an off-market, direct-to-vendor approach rather than just waiting for that house to come on the market through Rightmove as well. So then you're getting that, hopefully a much better deal than just competing with everyone else on Rightmove. So, right. Hopefully that was insightful. In terms of next steps, which we'll come on to first, and then we'll jump into a Q&A section. For Nimbus Maps, if you are interested in Nimbus Maps, you want to speak to the team and get a demonstration before then having a little play around with it yourself, then use the link here. What I will do is I will post that in the chat now, and that will then book you in a call with one of the team. We have a team now dedicated for property developers and investors, including HMOs, who are working with those people day in, day out, and we're able to give you a real detailed run through of how that works for you. And then we can then get you set up with a trial for you to play around with that yourself. The elite packages we spoke about, there are 3 different ones there. I won't go through all this right now, but I'll just leave it up for anyone on the recording who can sort of pause it here and sort of read this information. Obviously, HMOs and commercial conversions are the 2 we spoke about there. And then ultimately, lots of great reviews. We have support and success that will make sure everyone is successful, should anyone be interested in using Nimbus Maps to help them find HMOs. And then Matt, I believe you've got some things you want to talk about.
Yes, so the question we get quite a lot is how do we work with people? How do we help people? We've got a number of ways that we do, but I'd say the first thing to do is to talk to us. And I mentioned about my book, and we, if anyone here today can register for a free copy of that, not a problem at all. We'll pop in a link in the chat in a moment. But something we're very excited about is our very first kind of face-to-face get-together since the pandemic, and since March next year. So on the Saturday 27th of November, we're doing a next level HMO discovery day. What we talk about is the next level HMO strategy, as opposed to just doing your bog standard, what I call beige box HMOs. So that is available. So if you there's a link down in the chat, you can find out more information about that, or book to have a call with us to find out more. So go on there. We're going to be covering everything from finding properties. So we do mention Nimbus in that. We would also talk about a bit of planning, a bit of finance. So HMO maths, we talk about HMO maths, commercial valuations, all of that in that day, as well as doing Q&A. If you've got deals you're looking at, you can bring them to that as well. I believe, though, we're doing some kind of deal clinic, aren't we, Andrew?
Yes. So I suppose that brings us on to sort of questions which we'll come on to, but yes, tomorrow, I believe at 2 o'clock, double check. Yes, at 2 o'clock, Matt and I will both be doing a dedicated deal clinic. So this is, we'll try and get through as many questions as we can, but I'm just conscious of everyone's time. I know I've sort of blocked out till past, but yeah, we'll get through as many questions as we can. But if not, definitely get on to the next one, which will send everyone who's attended this one, we'll send a link for the next one, which is tomorrow. And that one, it is just sat there. We'll have Nimbus Maps open. Matt and I will just answer questions. If you've got a particular property that you're thinking, what do we do here? What's the strategy? Whatever, absolutely bring those kind of questions to tomorrow's session. And it is just a dedicated session just to run through any properties that anyone may have, rather than us sort of trying to talk through different features or whatever and all of that kind of stuff. So this is all the information. Tomorrow is putting it in action and answering your questions, and we'll bring it up on the screen and actually go through it all as well. So right, let's open it up to questions then. I can see, well, Jay Oxley's just put a question in before I start working up the list there. So do feel free to put it in the chat or in that Q&A section as well. I will check both, but and I will stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how to get that to do that. What cost per square meter should I budget to refurb office to residential? I'm sure you've got your own specific build cost, Matt, but certainly from what I'm hearing, well, before Matt, tries to sort of, maybe reveal his own or his a ballpark of where he sees things, but from the conversations I'm having, refurb costs are definitely sort of getting north of £150 a square foot now. And for some people, I mean, even prices even higher than that, so clearly material costs are ramping up significantly. Labor costs are sort of creeping up a little bit, but fundamentally it seems to be that material cost which is sort of really driving build cost up there. But so conversions, I would certainly be suggesting somewhere north of £150 a square foot. I don't know whether that's aligning with what you're finding, Matt, or somewhere in that sort of ballpark.
Well, my initial thought was, how long's a piece of string? Because the thing about office to residential is that every project is different. It's not as simple as saying we're building a house on a greenfield site. It's going to cost X amount per square foot to build it, or per square meter. Every project is different. How many windows are you replacing? How much structural work is there? So it could range from anything from £100 to £200 a square foot. It can be dramatically different, which is why whenever we are appraising a deal, we don't go on a price per square footage. We break it down into a few different segments, which gives us a bit more control over that process, especially at the moment when labour costs and material costs are so high. So I think gone are the days of just kind of ballpark appraisals. We do a proper appraisal for each project that we do.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that's is a good point, Matt. Like obviously, we're talking to lots of people on a day in, day out basis, but when you're looking for yourself, then yeah, you're going to want to appraise that, and certainly working with a good builder or a good QS, depending on how big you're getting, but is going to be able to then look and appraise each one individually. But I think if you're just trying to sort of get a headline, let me just run quick fag packet appraisal figures, then yeah, you're going to have to be sort of certainly a bit north of that. But at the moment you start then in discussions with that property owner, yeah, you want to be getting very quickly confident in the figures you've assumed, which is going to be backed up by someone who.
This is why we see quite a lot of properties coming back on the market. I think quite a lot of people are underestimating their build costs, going and then just pulling out of deals. I'm seeing that quite a bit. So yeah, it is frustrating for those that when buildings go for more than we think people can actually do stuff with them. I can see people making mistakes right in front of my eyes by buying buildings far too much, especially at the moment. They're just buying reactively, from what I can see.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, like you say, due diligence is everything, isn't it, really? So
yeah, exactly.
Right, let's have a look at some of these other points. Clive, how much did it cost to appeal your planning refusal? That was Clive.
So the appeal with my planner was initial appeal was free because he just did it as a favor. So he just submitted that for me. I then done another one, and I had to get a transport note. Transport note's about £1,000. Again, planning fees again around about £1,000. So that was, yeah. So there's quite a bit of potential cost with it. So an extra £2,000. Yeah, that one, there's quite a bit more other costs associated with that problem. But yeah, in answer to your question, for about just over £2,000.
I think one of the bigger issues is, like you say, is just delays in that project, isn't it? And just having that finance cost just taking over as well, depending on how you've structured the deal and everything. So, timing ends up being quite a key one there as well.
Yeah.
We've got James asking, any response on the question about the accuracy of your data, in particular that's taken from sites such as Rightmove, etc. How do you know / confirm its accuracy? And to be honest, well, this is the same as Rightmove, really. We're only as accurate as the people who put the data in. So ultimately, like we say, we take EPC data. That's a surveyor who's filling out an EPC, you know, of going around and looking at that property. That is the best that we can go on. Likewise, Rightmove, when they're relying on a estate agent pulling a floor plan together and saying it's 1,000 square meters or whatever, that's all that, you know, that's all we can go off in terms of that information. Some bits are different, you know. I mean, if it's really about the breadth of the platform, you know, you've got obviously planning applications are coming directly from the planning portals, so they're as accurate as the planning portals. We've got ownership information coming from direct from land registry, so that's as that is the arbiter of who owns what, and therefore we're getting that direct from the source. You know, so like I say, some bits are as good as the information that goes in. We don't have an army of people who are going around and checking every single property. It is just all we can rely on, unfortunately, and it's anyone who's working nationally is you know, has got to work on that basis, basically.
I suppose the more data you have, you layer it on top of each other, that the more you can filter it and it more accurate it becomes, I think. And it's just about creating lots and lots of opportunity, so that, you know, yeah, and then you do your due diligence on the opportunity that you find. But without that lead, you got to know where to start.
Yeah, like I say, you could be looking at anything, can't you? You know, whereas if we say, well, look, this is, you know, on the face of it, from the data we've got, going to meet yours. And I would say, you know, we certainly don't get many comments coming back saying, you know, we've just bought this property. You said it was, you know, 4-bed, and you know, it turned out it was only a 2-bed or something. You know, like I say, there's an element of due diligence to go into all of these. It's never, you know, it's never to be relied upon in terms of a, you know, for investment decisions and all that kind of stuff. It's there to guide you, to inform you, and then you know, to be able to make those decisions. But like I say, you know, you always have a solicitor who's going to then do that land registry check right before you know, you complete and all of that kind of stuff, or before you exchange, because that's, you know, they'll always go back to those source data and make sure everything is as expected. Steve has asked, this is a question for you, Matt. When developing say a 20-bedroom block into 4 5-bed HMOs, does each one of those 4 have to have its own kitchen, shared lounge, separate utilities, etc., and be developed like it could be title split? If so, that's going to be a huge building.
Yes, in answer to your question, it is going to be a huge building. So a 20-bedroom block, you know, needs space, and I think that's something about, you know, the modern HMO can't be pokey anymore. It needs to have some space. So every deal is going to be different when you're looking at your building and what you can do with it. It's about saying what can you get in there and still have a really attractive property at the end. So so there's probably a couple of ways you could approach it. You either go, right, I want to have you know, a few larger HMOs, or you want to have more smaller HMOs, and that's going to come down to 2 things. One, which is what you can get through planning, through speaking with your experts and the planning department. The second thing is what is more lettable, what is more appealable. So you don't just go for, you know, 2 10-bed HMOs because it's easier for you. 2 10-bed HMOs is probably going to be harder to fill unless you create in a very creative way in how you lay it out. Also, the council might have an issue with 2 10-bed HMOs, but might not have an issue with 4 5-beds, for example. So there's a few things to put into account. But also you want to think about your exit as well. So some people like to divide them up into multiple units and divide them as if they are individual flats, because it does give you a potential exit to sell them off individually. But sometimes you want to maximize your commercial value, which means that you want to kind of amalgamate them and keep them on one title and do kind of stuff to make it seem like it's definitely one commercial asset. So sometimes you have to commit to one route to maximize value, and you obviously want to then be as formal as possible before you do. But again, like with anything, you've always got a potential fallback, because splitting a 20-bed HMO into 4 5-bed flats, some people would say that doesn't actually require planning.
Indeed. Well, hopefully that answers your question, Steve. Just sort of scrolling through the last few questions, you know, do throw in the last few before we sort of finish up. But I think someone's saying, where's the HMO data come from? And you're right, it is coming from the council's license lists, basically. In terms of updating, I want to say typically the sort of the least frequently updated information in the platform is typically a month. And I would just double check the HMO one, but typically everything is monthly at the latest. Planning applications, for example, although I was just told yesterday, planning applications now more or less hourly. We're then checking planning portals for planning applications. So it used to be every 24 hours. It's now hourly. So if you're really keen to find that planning application that's just been registered this morning, then do feel free to have a look. But yeah, so like I say, we'll keep those up to date regularly so that you can then keep an eye on where the HMOs are in your area. I think, does that cover off all the questions? I don't know whether there was any came through on the Q&A. No.
There's another one up here from Jason. Just been scrolling through, saying, am I right in thinking that an existing 5-bed HMO has no PD rights, even if it's not an Article 4 area? Is full planning the only option open to me if I want to expand the number of rooms? No, your C4. So C4 usage covers you from 4 to 6. If you want to go from 5-bed to 6-bed, you've got, you're in the same use class, so you can go up to 6 bedrooms. And also a C4 HMO still has the same permitted development rights as a family house. So you can extend out the back 3 meters without asking anyone, and 6 meters by asking the neighbours for terraced and semi-detached, and 8 meters if you're detached property. And you can also do loft conversions, adding 40 or 50 cubic meters of space there. So your C4 5-bed HMO still got lots of potential if the building can cope with it.
And then I suppose ultimately, yeah, I guess, Matt, you're saying you'd almost extend the building and then look to then submit that planning application to go from that 6-bed to a 7 or 8 bed,
If we were going more than 6, yes, definitely we'd use that PD right. Sui generis HMOs still have the same PD rights anyway, so you can take an 8-bed and extend it. If you've got a large footprint, it's still got that. It's one of those oddities. And councils will probably say no, they don't, but there is case law which you can refer to which says yes, they do. So and your planning consultant should know that. So if they don't, then find your planning consultant. Yeah, so you can still do that, but to make life easier, do the extension first and then apply for it, because if some councils don't like you to use permitted developments to facilitate a change of use to a larger HMO. So they'll refuse you because they'll say it's not big enough today. So then you have to extend it, then apply again and say, yes, now it's big enough, you can have it. It's backwards, but as we know, that a lot of planning departments think that way.
And I suppose, yeah, that does reiterate, doesn't it, about, working with a good planning consultant who's going to know that local authority well. Indeed. Right. So, and then I think, James, your point around white label options and all that kind of stuff, what I would recommend is booking a call. We can get in touch with James and we can talk about the options and everything if you're looking to do reports for clients and all that kind of stuff. So more than happy to work with you on those. So that seems to have covered off all the questions. Like I said, any specific ones around, I've got this property, what do you think? What are my options? How would I turn this into a HMO? We'll be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock to run through any sort of ideas and properties like that. But otherwise, just leaves us to finish up. Any last words from you, Matt?
No, just say thank you very much for having me again. And just remember, if anyone wants to connect, please do click on the link, and there's 3 options in there for how you can get in touch with us and learn more and get a free copy of the book in the post.
Which, yeah, like I say, is going to be a massive resource for HMOs. So, well, thank you very much, Matt. Really appreciate your time today, and thanks for giving up your time. And thank you to everyone else for giving up your time as well. My name's been Andrew Green, and we've been Nimbus Maps. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye-bye now.